Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. The year is 2026, and that marks the 30th anniversary of the Pokemon franchise. To celebrate this milestone, we got 2 games released this year. The first is a lovable, immersive, cozy game called Pokemon Pokopia, and the second, released on April 8th, 2026, is the live service PvP and esports-focused Pokémon Champions. Developed by the Pokémon Works, which is a joint venture between the Pokémon Company and ILCA, Champions was marketed as the definitive competitive Pokémon experience, a free-to-start battle simulator that would become the official platform for the video game championships, including the 2026 Pokémon World Championships, which are later this year. This game was supposed to be the future of competitive Pokémon. Instead, it arrives as one of the most embarrassing product launches in the entire franchise's history. Pokémon Champions, as shipped, represents a failure across every measurable business axis. For instance, technical performance, content delivery, competitive integrity, consumer trust, and corporate accountability. Players should reject this product, and the Pokémon Company, which does not like to have negative press brought about it, should be held accountable for shipping this broken game. Today's indie game shoutout is Sands of Aura, an open-world action-adventure with a fantasy setting of a realm in its twilight. Sail across the sand seas to return life to a dying world in an unforgettable experience that is equal parts engaging story and unrelenting Souls-like combat. To learn more about this and hundreds of other games, visit our free indie game discovery network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Okay, to start, let's talk about the developer here. The Pokémon Works was established in 2024 as a joint venture between the Pokémon Company and ILCA, a Tokyo-based studio founded in 2010. Pokémon Champions is the Pokémon Works' debut title. To understand the significance of this, it is necessary to examine ILCA's history. ILCA began as a production house specializing in animation and visual effects. It gradually transitioned into game development, initially in a support capacity. Its first lead development role on a Pokemon product was Pokemon Home, the cloud storage application. Its first and only lead role on an actual Pokemon game prior to Champions was Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl in 2021. Yeah, see, that's what makes this very important, because BDSP's reception was extremely mixed amongst critics and fans alike. The nature of any of the criticism foreshadowed how Champions was going to play out. BDSP players reported soft lock bugs requiring full game restarts, glitch cloning exploits, out-of-bound errors, clunky controls, and a general sense that the product was very rushed and underpolished. The Pokemon Company's decision to entrust the single most important competitive product in the franchise's history to this studio, rather than to someone like Game Freak, which, to be clear, I don't know what's going on over there either. Personally, I'm not happy with Game Freak either. Or maybe they could have done this with a proven partner like Koei Tecmo, which just demonstrated its capabilities with Pokopia. Overall, this is a leadership decision that demands scrutiny. There was already a negative history with ICLA, implying that perhaps Champions was treated as a lower priority project and just a vehicle for monetization. Maybe that's all this really was. Pokemon Champions, as it stands today, launched with technical problems that would be unacceptable in any commercial software release, let alone one intended to serve as the backbone of a global esports circuit. But let's go through some of these problems one at a time. Number 1, the performance. The game is locked at 30 frames per second on both the original Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2, including in docked mode on the newer hardware. Reports from players across Reddit, Twitter, and dedicated Pokemon communities describe frame pacing problems, stuttering animations, and an overall sense of jankiness that undermines the precision required for competitive play. For context, Pokemon Legends ZA runs at a locked 60 FPS in battles on the Switch 2, despite that also having its own problems. Champions, which renders 2 teams of Pokemon in a single arena, cannot match half of that standard. Number 2, some game-breaking bugs. Within hours of launch, competitive players documented bugs that fundamentally break the battle system. For example, a focus sash, which is an item that should prevent a Pokemon from fainting in one hit, was caught activating on a Pokemon that was not holding it. Another example, a Milotic uses Haze, which is a move that resets stat changes and has no healing effects, recovered from 1% HP to 92% HP. Battles frequently freeze on the connecting screen, resulting in automatic forfeits that affect ranked standings. Each of these bugs goes beyond just cosmetic. In a competitive context, any one of these can dramatically deter the outcome of a match. But perhaps the most damaging technical failure is a bug in the Pokemon Home transfer system that has left players' Pokemon trapped in a state of digital purgatory. When attempting to transfer Pokemon from Home to Champions, an error can occur that prevents the transfer from completing. The Pokemon cannot be sent to Champions, it cannot be traded within Home, and it cannot be returned to the game that it was originally from. They are, for all practical purposes, lost for good. Yeah, this is a huge problem. Some of these Pokemon could originate from the original Game Boy game titles released 30 years ago. When you consider what Pokemon Home was supposed to be, and it seems like this Pokemon Champions was what Pokemon Home was always leading towards, the fact that you can lose a potentially 30-year-old Pokemon in that is just negligence. Now, I will say, I'm fairly sure bugs like this are going to be resolved in the very near future, but still, shipping the game with any type of bugs like this, where playing the game is dramatically impacted, means they either weren't testing enough to find these bugs because they're that bad, or, and more likely, they shipped the game knowing the bugs were there and figured they'd fix it later. Either way, this is again negligence and embarrassing behavior for the 25th richest company in Japan. Number 3, false advertising. The gap between what Pokemon Champions was marketed as and what was delivered on April 8th constitutes, at minimum, a severe case of misleading promotion. Multiple items, Pokemon, and features shown in official trailers and promotional materials are absent from the launched product. The launch roster consists of 186 Pokemon. For reference, Pokemon Stadium 2, released in 2000 on Nintendo 64 hardware, and featured 251 Pokemon. There are right now 1,025 Pokemon across 9 generations. But that is all part of the plan, my friends. The artificially constrained roster of 186 Pokemon, and the missing items as well, is part of the monetization strategy. Pokemon Champions has been explicitly described by the Pokemon Company as a live service game that will be supported basically forever, with seasonal updates, balance patches, and rotating regulations. The 186 Pokemon available at launch are not the full product, and they aren't supposed to be. They are Season 1. Future Pokemon will be drip-fed across subsequent seasons, each new wave reshaping the metagame and rendering previously optimized teams obsolete. Players who have spent victory points, in-game currency training a team for the current meta will find the team incomplete or uncompetitive when the next season arrives with new Pokemon, new items, and new Megastones, many of which will likely be gated behind premium battle passes or require additional VP grinding. This is the model that has been pioneered by mobile gacha games and adopted by titles like Fortnite, Apex Legends, and critically, Pokemon Unite, a game that has been widely criticized for predatory monetization. The difference here is that at least Unite was a standalone MOBA game that exists alongside the rest of the Pokemon ecosystem. Champions is not alongside anything. It is the competitive scene. There is no alternative. Part 4, the TCG Pocket model. Yeah, the most damning comparison for Pokemon Champions is not another battle simulator per se, it is another Pokemon spin-off released in the same era. TCG Pocket launched in October 2024 as a mobile adaptation of the Pokemon trading card game. It was, and still is, a commercial juggernaut, surpassing 100 million downloads and $500 million in revenue by February 2025. 2005, just a few months after launch. It was also, crucially, designed to coexist with the physical TCG game rather than replace it. TCG Pocket features its own unique card sets, its own rules, and its own metagame. Pokémon Champions did the opposite here. Rather than creating a complementary competitive experience that could grow alongside the mainline VGC, the Pokémon Company made Champions the mandatory replacement. Even though it's missing a majority of the playable Pokémon, is loaded in bugs, and isn't yet in a worthwhile state. But don't you worry, Nintendo fans, you'll be able to spend all the money you want on this broken game. Pokémon Champions is marketed as free to start. In practice, it layers 3 distinct monetization systems on top of a competitive game that players are being forced to adapt. The starter pack is a premium bundle priced at approximately $7 that includes additional Pokemon storage, bonus tickets, and an extra battle song. The membership is a recurring subscription that unlocks additional box space, more battle team slots, member-exclusive missions, and exclusive cosmetics. The Battle Pass is a seasonal progression system with free and premium tracks, whereas the premium track gates the most valuable rewards, including Megastones and unlockable Pokemon. These 3 systems exist on top of a game that already requires a Nintendo Switch Online subscription for online play and a Pokemon Home subscription for players who want to transfer Pokemon from previous games. A player who wants the full Champions experience here is looking at 4 separate recurring costs plus a one-time premium bundle, really living up to the free to start in the advertising. Pokémon Champions is a disappointing game, and it also serves as a case study in how a corporation can leverage an established brand with an active community into a layered monetization marketplace using an unfinished product with minimal accountability. The game launched with fewer Pokemon than a title released on the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, and I know that's part of the strategy to keep people coming back and buying, but it seems really sleazy. It runs at half the frame rate of its immediate predecessor on the same hardware. It's shipped with bugs that break fundamental competitive mechanics, and so players should refuse to normalize this. They should refuse to spend money on microtransactions in a product that is not finished. Players, fans, everybody really, gamers abroad, should demand loudly and publicly that this Pokemon company needs to be held accountable for shipping such a broken mess. This is just another live service game in an era of nothing but live service games that disappoint. And this one is in a more broken state than even Highguard was. It should be rejected accordingly. Until next time, my friends, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and cancel Disney... For the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. Goodbye.